everybody. It's good to see you. So I need to introduce you to somebody, and it's not actually Chris Wirt right now. A lot of you know Chris Wirt. So we've got a new church family member among us that's here today for the very first time. A lot of you know Brian and Ashley Yoder adopted little Ellie a few years back, and today they are here for the very first time with little Warren. Would you guys stand up and just show off little Warren? So obviously we are thrilled about that. What was really nice is this time the trip was only 10 days in Ethiopia as opposed to 3 months last time or something. So 6 months. Wow. That's a lot. So you got stories, yes. Well, we're so excited. So Warren, welcome to the family, buddy. So, and let's also give some love for Chris Wirt, who's up here with us today too. So. It always stinks when you follow up a cute little baby, isn't it? It's like, oh, what do you do after that? So a lot of you know that one of our ministry partners is Kids Alive. We've been ministry partners with them for quite a while, and Chris Wirt has been our leader behind so much of that with organizing all of our trips and everything. And her husband, Chris, just got back from being down there a few weeks ago and have a little bit of a ministry update on what's going on down in Jarabacoa in the Dominican Republic, where we're heavily involved. So, Chris?
Thank you. First of all, I talk with my hands, so they give me a hand mic and a clipper here. So I'm going to do my best to stay focused here, but I apologize in advance. First of all, I want to remind you that after the service today, about 11:45, I'm going to be back in the library to talk to those church members who are going on this adult trip for the very first time. Or if you are still thinking about it and have some questions, I'm going to be back there for you. If you've done this trip before, your meetings are coming later. So the other thing is, if you're going on this trip, you have 2 weeks to get your $100 deposit in. That's going to assure that you're on the same flight with the rest of us traveling down there. So please mark your calendar. As Chris said, Chris and I, my husband Chris, there's a lot of Chris's here, spent 10 days in the DR last month. We went in February. We've gone every year, sometimes twice a year, and quite honestly, we didn't want to wait until April to go back. So we planned our own little mini mission trip for 10 days, and I'm just going to share a little bit of that with you. Those of you who went on the trip in February, remember our team's major project was laying cement block on the second floor of the new school building at Palo Blanco. And this is what the building looked like last month. Most of the projects are completed as funding is available, which means when service teams go down, they make a donation, and then you buy the supplies and you work. They were able to get a huge donation from a church to buy the supplies and hire Dominican help as well as the use of teams to bring the building this far along. The classrooms on the bottom floor are being used right now. The top floor is still being finished on the inside. The other thing is the aquaponics program is going full speed ahead at Palo, and this is just a picture of Chris and Derek and John Carlos having a little bit of fun filleting fish. And there's a story behind that. I'm not going to go into it, but this was one of our very first projects on the first day. The other thing you'll notice is Derek and John Carlos are wearing one of the new aquaponics shirts, and I'm sporting a version of it as well. They are for sale. It is a fundraiser. They're approximately $10 US. I'll give you more information on that down the road, but I know some people here have already saw my shirt and said I want one of those. So we'll work on that if you guys are interested in that. One of our major projects when we were down there is building a fish pond. And we were transported up into the mountain in the middle of nowhere to build a fish pond. And we did it all by hand with shovels. We used pickaxes. We used wheelbarrows. This is huge. This is a lot of hard work, but we mixed cement on the ground. We carried buckets. It's manual labor. If you go on this trip, that's the kind of stuff you're going to be doing. We're not going to be building a fish pond in the middle of the mountain, but it's going to be similar. We usually work at one of the ministry sites when we're down there. While I was down there, I had this brilliant idea that I was going to try to gather all of your sponsored kids together for one big picture at the individual sites. And needless to say, that was chaos. I was trying to grab kids off the playground and bring them up to the building and say, wait here, and try to get others. And by the time I got back, I had like 50 kids. I had no idea who half of them were. They were climbing, they were jumping, they were grabbing my camera. I apologize. I could not make it happen. Between their level of excitement and the language barrier, I just have some random pictures of some of your sponsored kids. Jiley and Veronica here, those are part of our church family. We've got Netalina and Fafana, Kim and RD. Netalina's doing great. She seems to be thriving. I don't know where you guys are. And then Keith and Jane, there's your young lady who appears to be about 6 inches taller than she was in February. So beautiful little lady. We got to visit the Ark a couple times. There's a picture of Fabiani. She has grown up quite a bit, Neil. And then a picture of Winifred. We call her Winnie. This is Luke and Abby's other sponsored child. And then Rosie, her and Maxim are like, they'd be basketball players if they were in the States. They are so tall. So you're going to be so excited to see her when you go back because you're going with us in April. And then, of course, we got to meet up with our sponsored girls who are technically no longer in the program, but they have grown up to be beautiful young ladies. So we spent an evening with them at Pizza Pepperoni. So those of you who have been there before, this was a really special evening for us. One of our other responsibilities while we were there was helping in the wood shop. Those of you who have gone on the trips over the years know that we laid cement block, we painted, we ran electrical, so we put a lot of sweat equity in this building. So they have woodshop programs there with all donated tools, and most recently they started a class for girls, which is a little bit of a culture shift, but there's young women there who want to learn that skill. So they're starting to teach the girls how to make things. They start all the kids out making cutting boards and little trophy cases. And then the cutting boards, once they've mastered that, they make them and they sell them. So the money from the sale of the cutting boards goes back into buying the supplies to be able to continue the woodshop program at the school. And this is a picture of one of the little girls who made her first cutting board. And then the boys are now making dominoes. They've mastered cutting boards, they're making the little domino games, and they're theirs to take home. So all of these tools and all the supplies and everything is all donated to help these kids learn a skill, so once they're out of school, they have something that they can go on to. The problem is, in the back of the wood shop sits this bandsaw, which no longer works. And it's been sitting there for quite a while, and they need the bandsaw. So this is where I'm asking for some help. We have been trying to find this little itty-bitty part that needs to be replaced. We've searched online, we've asked around, we can't find anything. If anybody here has a connection or knows of anyone who might help find discontinued parts for a discontinued piece of equipment, my Chris has the model number, the part number, and everything. We'd like to be able to take that part back with us in April. The other thing would be is if we can't find the part, if anybody has a bandsaw they're no longer using, it's sitting in a wood shop, in a garage, in your basement, and it still functions, if you would like to donate it, we'd like to take it down there and replace this broken bandsaw so that the kids could use it. Our third option, which I hope we don't have to go to, is to purchase a new one and take it with us in April. We priced these in the Dominican, and it's about $1,000 US. We priced it at Home Depot here, and it's $295 plus shipping, $295. We don't want to have to go this route, but if we have to, I may come back in a couple months and say, anybody want to help donate towards that purchase and the shipping costs? We can't ship it down there directly from the store, and if we did do that, the customs process in the DR sometimes ends up that the product is missing. So we don't want to do that. We want to take it with us in April. So if you guys want to check your old wood shop, basement, family members, coworkers, if anybody has a business and they know where to get discontinued parts, connect with my husband, Chris, not that Chris, and we will see if we can't get that part and take it down next time. So, thank you.
That'd be great. Great. Hey, Bennett, go ahead and stand. Just so you have an idea of what he looks like. If you're one of those people that knows something about the parts or something, that's the guy you want to go check out. So, but thank you guys for the update. Thanks for continuing to represent us so well with our partnership with Kids Alive. We appreciate that. So my wife was talking with our middle daughter the other day, and they got to talking about money. And she was pretty excited that she had $7 to her name right now. And they were talking about what she could do with that. Because, the tendency, especially I know when I was a kid, did anybody ever have any money left in their pocket? Like it got there and it was gone, in and out. Anybody like that? As soon as you got it, it was gone. There was no such thing as saving anything, right? So they were talking about that, and she was talking about spending money on something that would just, blow the money real quick. But it was like, yeah, but is there something else you want to work towards? And she's like, yeah, I want to work towards that, so I'm going to hold on to my $7. She goes, actually, what I want is like $1,000, because then I can buy a house. And so we've got a little bit of work ahead of us to do on finances. But how many of you, when you were a kid, you hoped that you would be rich when you grew up? Yeah. I remember in elementary school, I remember the first time we moved, and our next door neighbor had a swimming pool. And I thought, oh my gosh, they are so rich. Like that was my understanding of rich when I was in elementary school. In junior high, I remember thinking like, man, if I had a Lamborghini, then I'd be rich, right? In high school, I remember thinking like, man, all I want is a mansion with a bowling alley. That's what I want. Then I'll be rich, right? Do you know somebody who's rich? I'm guessing you know somebody who's rich, and you look at the way that they spend their money, and you think to yourself, if I were rich like that, I would do a better job of being rich. Being honest? Yeah, professional athletes? Anything? Anybody look at other people and go, I would do much, much better job with my money if I was in their shoes, right? So how many of you would say that you are filthy mega rich? Nobody? Where is the line to being rich? I mean, how many of you ever got paid on the 15th of the month and you said, okay, I finally crossed the line? I mean, yesterday I wasn't rich, but today, woohoo, I'm rich. I finally got here, right? And if you do cross this imaginary line, what happens? You get to the other side and you suddenly think, oh man, the rich line, it just moved again. I thought it was here, but suddenly it feels like it's way up here now. So what I want to do over the next few weeks is I want to help many of us see that you've already crossed the line. I want you to realize, and I want you to be able to say, I'm actually already rich. And since God has blessed me with more than I need, I want to be rich in what matters the most. I want to be rich in a way that honors God. And we're going to use 1 Timothy 6, verses 17 through 19, as one of our theme verses throughout this series. And in the book of 1 Timothy, which is found in the New Testament, which is the portion of the Bible where all of the books that are written about Jesus' life here on earth and those written about after his resurrection and return to heaven, all of those are found in the New Testament. And in 1 Timothy, the very wise apostle Paul, who wrote a huge portion of the entire New Testament, he's giving advice to this young pastor named Timothy. And this particular advice that he's passing on to Timothy was on this topic of how do you help people who are rich be good at being rich? And this is what he tells them, starting in verse 17. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. It says, don't be arrogant. In other words, don't think it's all because of you. Now, yes, you may have worked hard. Yes, you may have been faithful. Yes, you may have lived beneath your means and invested well or whatever. But ultimately, you have to recognize that everything that you have is a gift from God. Your talent, your ability, your mind, your life, the air that you breathe, every blessing that you have ultimately comes from God. And every blessing that we don't turn back to praise has the potential to turn to pride. And I don't know if any of you know any rich, arrogant people, but when you've earned a lot, it's easy to think, wow, I must be pretty special now. So Paul tells Timothy to warn rich people, don't be arrogant. Don't put your hope in wealth, which is uncertain, but put your hope in God, who richly provides everything for our enjoyment. And then he goes on in verse 18 and 19, command them to do good. I'm having like some junior high moments up here, aren't I? Had a little strep throat this past week. Anybody enjoy that this winter at all? Yeah, it's got some junk in there. Command them to do good, be rich in good deeds, be generous and willing to share. In this way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. Help the rich people to be good at being rich, to make a difference, and to be rich in what matters the most. So as a foundation for today, what I want to do is I want to try to help us define what is rich. Because if we don't know exactly the rich line, let's try to get our mind set around what it could be. And I did a little research. Gallup did a study, and they asked different people at different wage levels, how much would you need to earn to be rich? And this is what they found. He asked a group of people who made $30,000 a year, how much would you need to be rich? And the average response for those making $30,000 a year was, if we made $74,000 a year, we would be rich. Now, some of you make $74,000 or more a year, and you want to say, sit down and let me teach you a little lesson. That is not rich. We don't feel so rich, and we're in that category. They asked people who made $50,000 a year, how much would you need to be rich? And the average response for that group was $100,000. Dude, if I made six figures, I would be so rich, you couldn't even stand to be around me because I would be so rich. And again, there are those here who make $100,000 or more. And you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I got news for you. When you've got teenage drivers, when you have private school, when you have dance class, when you have soccer, and you're sending kids to camp and braces again, and college is coming up and a wedding is in the future, $100,000, not so rich. They asked the top income earners, those who made over $200,000 a year, how much in assets would you need to have to be rich? The average response, $5 million. And all the rest of us are going, duh, right? Of course, with $5 million, that would be rich, okay? But what's funny about that is if you ask the lazy rich, the ones that only make like $2 million a year, if you ask them, are you rich? They say, no, I'm not rich. I need more to be rich. Because the rich line continues to move. I remember out of college, I was a religion youth ministry major in college, and I got out of college, my first youth pastor position, I made $21,000. And I thought I was rolling in the Benjamins when I was making $21,000 a year. But I remember a good friend from college who was an engineer got into a position, and he was making $40,000 a year. And I kid you not, you know what my first thought was? What would you do with all that money? That was my first thought. I'm like, I'm pretty happy with what I'm starting at, considering what I'm doing, but what would you do with $40,000 a year, right? But you know what happens. You know how life gets full. Whether you're single or you're married or kids, being comfortable, life expenses, $40,000 a year, not so much, is it? The line keeps moving upward. And the challenge is if we don't feel rich, we're going to continue to focus on trying to get rich. And one day we're actually going to pass that rich line, and we're not even going to realize it. And the reality is we already have. And therefore, if we get to a place where we're just chasing that next dollar, where we're still looking at what does it look like to be rich, and I've got to have more, and I have to have more, and I have to have more. If that becomes our focus, we are going to miss out on what matters the most. So I want to look at what God's Word has to say about teaching us to be good at being rich. Now, I have some good news and I have some bad news for you today. The good news is almost all of you are already rich. And the reason I know this is that you have rich people opportunities. If you have kids, you can expose them to books and libraries. You can take them to the zoo. They can be activities. They can be in sports. They can get music lessons. They can get their teeth straightened. They can get operations to help. They can get surgeries to make their bodies better if they're sick. You can save time with money. Maybe instead of washing your own car, most of you can afford to drop $6 to get your car washed for you. A lot of you can afford to hire a babysitter so you can go out for the evening. Most of you have enough money to help somebody who's in need who maybe otherwise would miss a meal. In fact, when you recognize that this is a gift from God, that He has blessed you in a very significant way, it changes your heart, it changes your stature, and it changes what you're capable of doing. King Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, wrote this in Ecclesiastes 5:19. When God gives somebody wealth and possession and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. Every single one of us has been blessed by God. And we need to internalize that. We need to believe that. We need to let that soak into our hearts that we are already genuinely rich. Now, I know some of you still are going to push back on what I'm saying here. You're thinking, no, I'm not. You don't understand. You may be rich, but I'm not rich. And what you need to understand when you leave here today is that you are rich. I want to encourage you to check this out. I know Tech Team, we were playing with this website beforehand. There's a website you can go to that's called Global Rich List, all one word, globalrichlist.com. Let me give you 2 statistics from this. If you make $33,000 or more, this is net, what you bring home. If you make $33,000 or more, let's see how you stack up compared to the rest of the world. $33,000. This is compared to everybody else's net income in the world. If you make $33,000 or more a year take home, you are a 1%er. You make more money than 99% of the 7.6 billion people on the planet. $33,000. You are a 1%er. Now, let me give you some perspective on this global list. It's because almost half of our population of this planet, 7.6 billion people, live on $2.50 or less a day. Half of the population. 80% of the world population lives on $10 or less a day. Let those numbers soak in. 80% of the 7.6 billion people on our planet live on $10 or less a day. 33,000 or more. 1%er. And let's put one more number in. Let's go ahead and put in $80,000. If you earn $80,000, this is your net income. If you earn $80,000 a year or more, you are in the top 10th of that 1%. You bring home $80,000 a year, you make more than 99.9% of the 7.6 billion people on the planet. So guys, why is this so hard for us to understand that we're rich? Why is that so hard for American Christians to understand that we are already rich? The problem is that top left corner, those first couple categories, that top 1%, that top 2%, they are saturated around us here in the United States, aren't they? We don't have an accurate view of global money. You and I are surrounded by 1%ers. They're everywhere around us. Our country is filled with them. So what happens? We only compare ourselves to the 1%ers, don't we? And it's important when we think about how God views us being rich that we have to back up, that we have to see the big picture of what God is doing in the world around us and recognize, no. You can't do blinders here in that top left corner and just compare yourself to everybody that's in that category. You got to back it up, and you got to look and see where has God placed you financially in the scope of 7.6 billion people. And when you see that picture, you recognize, and maybe for the first time ever, it can finally sit in, that you are already rich. Now, even after I gave you those statistics, many of you are still going to push back and say, I'm not rich. But then after service today, you're going to drive home to your climate-controlled home. You're going to watch one of several televisions you own. And you're going to upload a picture of something fun you do today onto Facebook or onto your Instagram account using your mobile device that has an unlimited data plan. Okay, work with me. We're doing okay. All right? You are rich. You are rich. When people from developing countries talk about rich people, about 3 billion people would describe rich people this way. Let me tell you about rich people. Rich people own cars. If you own a car, you are in the top 3% of the wealthiest people alive. That's rich. They would say some of the rich people, they're so rich, they have an extra car. They've got one for him and one for her. They've got 2 cars. Some people, they're so rich, you're not going to believe it, they've got houses for their cars. They call them garages. They drive their cars into the garage to keep the car safe from the weather elements. Some of these people are so rich, they have 3-car garages, one for both of their cars and an extra one for all the junk that won't fit in the rest of their house. These rich people, they'll drive their cars past 15 buildings called restaurants, and they get to their 16th one because it's their favorite, and then they order 3 meals. The first one is called an appetizer, the second one is called a main course, and the third one is called dessert. And when they drive home into their house, some of them have closets that you can walk into. And some of these closets, they're bigger than the homes of people all over the world. Some of them have a his closet and a her closet, and almost all of them have 2 levels of clothing. They walk by these rich people and they touch all their clothes, and they're so rich they say, I've got nothing to wear. And the problem is that when I say you're rich, very few people are like, oh, I feel so relieved. Now the debt doesn't bother me anymore because I'm rich. Thanks, Chris. And the reason you didn't do that is because you don't feel rich. And the reason you don't feel rich is because you consume everything God gives you. And that's why you don't feel rich, because you consume it all. If you get more, you consume more. Some of you are very, very rich and you don't feel rich because you consume it all. And God says, command those rich people to be good at being rich, not just to think that it's all for them. God wants us to be good at being rich. And if we're going to be good at being rich, the first thing we have to do is admit that we are rich. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to look to the people to your left and your right and just say, I'm loaded. Just go ahead. I'm loaded. Now, the challenge is, many of you still don't believe this, all right? Some of you are even embarrassed at what just happened there. But I want you to start paying closer attention to your day-to-day life. And I want you to pay attention to all of the rich people luxuries that you get to enjoy every day that just aren't a reality to the 99% of the rest of the world's 7.6 billion population. You are rich. And that's the good news. And you need to know that because it's really, really good news. You have rich people opportunities. You can make a difference in the world. We have been blessed by God. We are rich, and that is good news. Now for the bad news. And I can't tell you how bad this news is, because it is. It is one of the greatest challenges that you will ever have to overcome in order to be an effective follower of Christ. Are you ready for the bad news? The good news is you're rich. What's the bad news? You're rich. That's the bad news as well. Being rich is one of the greatest spiritual disadvantages that you will ever have. Let that soak in. Being rich is one of the greatest spiritual disadvantages that you will ever have. What in the world are you talking about, Chris? Let me give you an example of that. Jesus encounters this rich guy who said one time, hey, I want to follow after you, Jesus. What do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, well, obey all the commands. And the guy says, well, I've done that. And Jesus says, well, you need to go sell your possessions and you need to give them to the poor and then come and follow me. Now, Jesus isn't opposed to us having nice things. Throughout the Bible, God gives wealth to people. God's not opposed to us having nice things. What God does not want is for those things to have us. And that was the problem that Jesus saw in this guy's heart. the things had him. And this is the only person Jesus said this to, but he said, you need to sell these things. You need to give that stuff away, and you need to come and follow me. You cannot let the things rule your heart. I need to be number one in your heart. And the story says the guy was sad. He was unwilling to do it because he had great wealth. And Jesus said these words, how hard it is for the rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. Indeed, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of heaven. The good news is you're rich. The bad news is you're rich. And it's a tremendous spiritual disadvantage if we let our stuff have us instead of the other way around. Let me give you 3 of the challenges that we have as rich people. The first one, for all of us rich people, the first problem we have is that being rich makes it harder for us to depend on God. It really does make it harder for you and I to depend on God. You go to a developing country, we were just talking about the Dominican Republic. You go there, and there's nothing but God to depend on. And when you look at the peace and you look at the sense of security that these financially poor people have because they place all of their trust in God, you can almost become jealous of it because we have so many other things to depend on that aren't God. When Jesus taught his followers to pray, he told them to say to God, give us today our daily bread. In other words, give me today what I need today. And the reality is, most of us have never had to sincerely pray that prayer because we've got a cabinet full of bread or something else to eat. It's harder for us to depend on God, and that can be a tremendous spiritual disadvantage. The second challenge of being rich is that it easily distracts us from true priorities. It distracts us from true priorities. Now, take this in the sense of love that it's meant, and I hope you're getting this, that there's a challenge that we have here as American Christians of following after God and getting caught up in all of this stuff. If you're a follower of Jesus, you know that getting together with other believers and the worship of God in a church family is a true priority. Yet some hardly make it, and some go long stretches missing out on these priorities to their growth. And for many, the reason is because they have rich people distractions. Think about that for a second. When we're gone from gathering with our church family, what is it that we're usually doing? Vacations, travel sports leagues, fun day trips. There's all kinds of possibilities, right? All kinds of possibilities. But in the end, we choose something good over something that's even better. And the reality is we have rich people distractions going on all around us that most of the world is not capable of doing. People who aren't rich don't have the distractions that you and I have, right? You get where I'm going with that? And this applies to so many other areas of our lives too. We are just so busy with the possibilities that we become poor at prioritizing them. And as a result, our faith is watered down because we are simply distracted by way too many other things that just don't matter that much in the scope of life and in the scope of eternity. And the truth is, because they don't have all the rich people distractions that we have, Christians in third world countries are typically much more dialed in to the things that matter most to the heart of God than us Christians here in the United States. We get so caught up with our stuff and all of the distractions around us that we miss out so much on what God is calling us to do in the world around us. Being rich makes it harder for us to depend on God, and it can often distract us from the true priorities that God wants to do in us and through us. And the third big challenge with being rich is that because we are rich, we have a greater responsibility. We have a tremendous responsibility because of what God has given to us. Jesus said, to whom much is given, much is required. I know some of you think that's from the Spider-Man movies. Jesus said it a long time before he did. All right? To whom much is given, much is required. And you need to understand that that's speaking to you and that's speaking to me. That's speaking to rich people. Much is required of us. And that can be bad news because a lot of us, we're using all of the wealth that we're bringing in on ourselves. And God's word says, command those rich people to be rich in good deeds and to be generous and to be willing to share. Then they will lay up treasures for themselves in heaven, and they will have life now that is truly life. The bad news is there's more expected of us because more has been given to us. And we need to internalize that, and we need to turn it into good news. And it can become good news. In fact, it has become great news in a lot of the things that we have done here together as a church family at Community Church of Waterford. Chris was just up here talking about our partnership with Kids Alive. We don't know the exact numbers on that, but I mean, think about that. A church our size sponsoring like 180 children in the Dominican Republic, getting ready to send our, what is this going to be, our ninth team, I think, that's getting ready to go down in April. Involved in all kinds of things. You saw the pictures of, the tangible things that we're involved with building stuff, with investing in children. That's awesome stuff. Some of you just did Christmas gifts. I just got to deliver those on Thursday to the gal who's going to be taking them to the Dominican. Some of you did gifts for that. We had 46 gifts come in for children that are going to get to open those for Christmas down there at the orphanage. Some of you gave towards Operation Christmas Child. We just had that. Did you guys see that out in the lobby area? They were packed out there. There's a pile of them out there. I grabbed one of them. But I love this, that children in other countries who get nothing, this is all they're going to get for Christmas. This is it. This is what they're going to get. But our families got together on Thursday night, and they put these beautiful things together. And it's more than just being about stuff. This is way more than being about stuff. The thing I love the most is that in the midst of this, getting this stuff, that these kids are getting colored notes from our children here that has the John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's the ultimate message that we're passing on to people is, hey, here's something that we hope you enjoy. We want you to feel valued, but this is even more important. There is a God who is crazy in love with you, and we want you to know that he cares for you and that you are not forgotten. 82 boxes are going out from families from our church family here. That is being rich in what matters the most. You see the trees out in the lobby area today. Adopt a family with the Salvation Army. We've been doing that for years now. All those tags that are out there, we've taken on 5 families, 19 children, about 100 gift tags that are out there. Something very simple that you can do instead of deciding to go, you know what, I'm not consuming all my stuff anymore. I'm recognizing this is a gift from God. I'm not going to consume it all anymore. We're going to prioritize some stuff here. I'm going to grab some of these tags. Little things like that can make such a difference of moving you towards the heart of God and how he wants to use you and how he wants to use your finances. Destiny Rescue, my goodness. How many activities have we had over the last 3 or 4 years? 3 years for our partnership with Destiny Rescue. Just through those, we've rescued over 30 children through a number of fundraisers. 21 of you were there with me a couple weeks ago in Fort Wayne, where we got together for the big Taste for Freedom and raised $133,000 to rescue more kids from sex trafficking. Talking about putting your money where it matters the most to the heart of God. That is being rich in what matters the most. It's fun to be rich in ways that honor God, isn't it? It's fun to be a part of that. It's fun to put your finances towards something that you know is making a real difference, not just in our time here on earth, but for eternity as well. Imagine if we took that intensity, imagine if we took that generosity and we just spread it out all year long. Imagine what we could accomplish when we start honoring the abundance of what God has given to us and put it towards things that are of greater purpose. Because between all of our ministry partners, between special projects, our building campaign that we're looking at, 2018 has the potential to see our church family here step up like it never has before. And I believe we have the heart to do just that. We are rich. God has blessed us with more than we need. And God says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, because every blessing we don't turn back turns into pride. Command them to be generous in good deeds and willing to share. And when they do, you will store up more important treasures in heaven, and you will experience life that is truly life. We're going to be good at being rich because God has blessed us with more than we need, and we will be rich in what matters the most. Now, we're talking about this. We shared just a little bit of a glimpse of where we're at with our current ministry partners, but we want 2018 to be bigger and better than anything we've ever done before. So let's go ahead and get on our feet, and let's sing this last song together that is all about the fact that we're just getting fired up. We're just getting amped up. There's still plenty more to do. Man, guys, I hope that was more than words. I hope that that is something that you genuinely feel in the depth of your soul, that God has greater things in store for us to do. We never want to be a church family that just sits and always is looking back and going, oh, look what we've done, look what we've done. I'm excited about what God wants to do next, and I hope you're equally excited about that. Let's close with a word of prayer. God, we are thankful that we are rich. And God, the reality is that probably for a lot of us, we just need to apologize right now to you. Because we kind of go around with this mindset of woe is me, and we look at our finances and we don't see ourselves as being rich at all. And yet the reality is that you have chosen to bless us in so many ways financially. You have given us so many rich people opportunities. And we've got to change our frame of mind first, God. We've got to recognize and know at the depth of our souls that we are rich now. There is no line to chase. There is no category of income to achieve. We are rich now. And we want to be good at being rich. God, I pray that you would work in our hearts, that you would work in our minds, that you would help us to see our finances in a brand new light, to recognize that it all is from you ultimately, and you want us to use it, and you want to leverage it through us to do those things that matter the most to your heart. And God, we want to be a people, we want to be a church family that is all about that. We believe that you have put on our hearts, and we've gotten to share that in recent weeks, some of these exciting things that you are stirring inside of our church family, inside of our church leadership to do. And we believe that you're going to continue to stir inside of each of us about what part we play in those things, because you are up to some amazing things, and we get to be a part of that if we open ourselves up to it. And part of that is our finances, God. It's an area that we don't talk about a lot with each other, but it's such an indicator of where our heart is with you. And we recognize today, God, that the reality is there can be a huge spiritual disadvantage to having all that we have, all these rich opportunities. And we need to be mindful of that, God, because we don't ever want to have our stuff have us. So God, help us with whatever it is that we need to change our thinking on. Help us with whatever it is that we need to start changing our behavior on, so that how we look at and how we treat, how we use our finances starts to line up more with the grander, bigger vision of what you desire for our lives. Be with us as we continue this series for the next couple of weeks. Continue to stir in us, continue to move in us, continue to grow us closer and closer to becoming more like Christ. Because that's why we're here today, Lord, is because we believe that you are growing us into more Christ-likeness, and that coming together as the church family is a big part of that process. So be with our church family this week, Lord. Continue to grow in us and move through us. Change the world around us using us, broken, messed up people. But that's your plan A, is to use us So God, we recommit ourselves today to saying that we are available. We are here. We want you to move in us. We want you to teach us. We want you to help us become better followers of your Son, Jesus Christ. And it's in his name that we pray. Amen. If you would like some prayer this morning, we'll have our prayer team up here in the corner. Otherwise, we will see you guys next week for week number 2 of Rich in What Matters Most.